In this episode, we talk about our experience and what we've learned about theft and the very serious subject of modern-day piracy here in the Caribbean. Last time, on Sailing Balachandra, we made a video about what to look for if you're looking to buy a liveaboard cruising sailboat capable of crossing an ocean. Hey guys, I'm Dan and my partner is Noel and we're sailing Balachandra. We sailed all the way from Nova Scotia, Canada down to the Caribbean, and we're sailing all around the Caribbean now making YouTube videos. Some of them, like this one, just to help you guys out if you're planning on cruising one day. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, go below the video, look for the big red subscribe button, press that button. Almost a year ago at the start of COVID-19, Noel and I were in the US Virgin Islands and the hurricane season was upon us and we needed to move south. At that time, the country of Grenada, which is known as a hurricane shelter, opened its borders to boats that needed to move south, and so we applied and were able to go and planned that trip. That trip meant that we had to sail directly from St. Croix to Grenada, which is about a 5-day passage. Our course from St. Croix to Grenada would take us south through the middle of the Caribbean Ocean. If you go back and watch our video on that trip, we arrived safe and sound without any issues other than a stitch that came out in our mainsail. You know, otherwise we arrived safe and sound and no issues. That's not entirely accurate. On the last night, we had a little scare that we didn't include in the video because it happened at night and we didn't get any footage. But now, after living in the Caribbean for a while, we have a better understanding of what actually happened that night and we can relate the story. We had a relatively uneventful sail from St. Croix to Grenada. Everything was going very well. We had fair weather and it was a good trip. On the last night, when the sun went down, we knew we were getting close to Venezuelan waters. We were aware that those waters have been known as an active zone for piracy, and so we took precautions just in case, which included running dark, that's turning off all of your running lights and cabin lights as they can be visible through your port lights, and making sure that you don't have a visible luminescence of any kind. It's a little dangerous because, especially without AIS, you're basically invisible to other yachts and other boats, but when you're worried about piracy, you kind of have to forgo some of those concerns. We were checking the chart plotter off and on, but trying to keep it dark, and we had one other yacht that was behind us. It was a sailboat and we could see his mast light and his running lights as he followed us. Sometime after midnight, I was looking at the chart plotter and I noticed some targets just showed up on the AIS. Unknown targets with no MSI number, no identification, just their direction and their speed. So they popped up within what should have been visible distance for us, and I would look off on the horizon to see these things and I couldn't see anything. There was nothing out there, just flat water and darkness. One object showed up, then a second object showed up, and they were only moving about 1 or 2 knots, just kind of drifting in the ocean, which raised a few concerns. Like, we were wondering what the heck that could be. And then a third object showed up, which was a vessel, and it was located just kind of off of these other two, and it wasn't moving at all. So as we were moving towards them, we realized that we couldn't go around these objects without getting too close to them, and the safest path was probably to go right in between, like straight down the middle. And as we got closer, the object started to actually move towards us, moving at about 4 knots. That freaked me out because I didn't expect, like, why would these two objects come towards us as we went between them? And the third object, which was a vessel, finally popped up a little bit of information. It said it was a fishing vessel, but I've known from other YouTube videos and from other cruisers that sometimes pirate vessels are fishing vessels that are just being used for piracy. Our reaction to that was to increase speed. We turned on the engine, we made sure our sails were out full, and we tried to make our best speed possible to try to slip through these two objects and see if we could get away. As we were getting closer to these objects, they started to move towards us even faster, which made us even more nervous, and we kept looking. We couldn't see anything on the horizon, but we knew there was other vessels out there of some kind, and they were running dark, which is concerning. So I had Noel go below and get our flares out just in case we had to put up some sort of a defense. At some point, these objects were just a couple hundred yards away and we still couldn't see them, and they were still moving towards us, but we did speed on through and we watched behind us to see what was happening. Turned out that it was just a false alarm, and we could, stand down and continue our night without incident. But it did freak us out quite a bit, and it woke us up to the possibility of what can be out there and what we need to be prepared for, especially sailing in waters that are known to have active piracy. In this week's video, I'd like to talk about Noel and I's take on piracy and theft here in the Caribbean, how we see it, what we've heard, and the practices we have here on Balachandra to keep ourselves safe and secure while we cruise in the Caribbean. There are many forms of piracy. We're not talking about pirates of Hollywood fame or pirates of long ago, privateers turned pirates raiding the Spanish Main for precious valuables. Today, real modern-day pirates pose a very serious threat to cruisers and boaters en route to a wayward destination. Now, in 2021, when I talk about pirates of yesterday, I'm thinking back to piracy reports I read when I first got into sailing. Latitudes and Attitudes magazine had a piracy report column that you could read monthly. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, pirates here active in the Caribbean would approach a yacht in a speedboat in order to overtake the yacht, do away with the crew, and use that cruising vessel as a method of smuggling drugs. I have a friend in the NATO branch of the military who told me that over the years, NATO has been diligent in stopping piracy in the Caribbean, and piracy was reduced in the Caribbean and many cruising areas were made safer. However, today, there's a new upturn in modern piracy. The threat is the same, the motives are different, and with COVID-19 changing the world, there are many unknowns yet to come, which has most of us cruisers concerned about safety in some of these waters in the months and years to come. From what we've gathered here in the Caribbean talking to locals and fishermen, the pirates of today are primarily concerned with moving drugs. However, theft and kidnapping are also on the menu. Here in the Caribbean, the top piracy hotspots would be anywhere in the proximity of coastal Venezuela, the coastal waters of Haiti, and the coastal waters of Nicaragua. However, pirates have been reported outside of these waters well into the central Caribbean Sea. When we were in Grenada, I had a chat with a local fisherman who was telling me about his piracy experience, and I wanted to share that with you guys. These local fishermen fish for tuna and other large fish, which means they have to leave the local Grenadian waters and sail either out into the Atlantic or well out into the Caribbean Sea. They sail on larger vessels and they can cover quite a bit of ground. He was telling me that he and other fishermen have had several run-ins with Venezuelan pirates. Apparently the pirates in Venezuela that they encountered were mostly doing some kind of drug deal at sea. They would drop their drugs somewhere with a flotation device and possibly an AIS or GPS transponder attached to it, and that the pirates would go somewhere just out of range and sit in the water and wait for those drugs to be picked up by somebody else. He said that generally anytime they ever get attacked by these pirates are when their fishing vessel happens to go in between the dropped drugs and the pirate vessel itself, and in which case those pirates may come over and mess with them. Towards our last days in Grenada, as we were about to leave and start sailing up the Windward Islands, there was 2 pirate attacks that had happened in that area, and we had read the reports. Both of them were attacks by Venezuelan pirates on fishermen. In one case, they approached the fishing boat and then robbed the fishermen and tried to take some of them hostage. They did eventually get away, and they did eventually get their boat back to St. Vincent and filed the report. The second pirate attack was very similar, and it happened closer to St. Lucia. And this was all during the time that Noel and I were sailing our boat from Grenada back north through the Windward Islands, so we were a bit nervous about that. From what we've heard and learned living here in the Caribbean and talking to other cruisers and the locals, we've been given some advice, and I'd like to share that advice with you guys. You want to pay attention to any and all reports of piracy, either through the local news or through websites that cover piracy here in the Caribbean, and it'll help you know what areas should be avoided and where piracy might be taking place. You want to avoid pirate waters. That can be done by giving those areas a wide berth or choosing a different course. It would be smart to run dark when sailing at night in the vicinity of pirate waters. We've done it twice, once when we traveled near the coast of Haiti and the second time when we traveled near Venezuela. Running dark can be dangerous as you're basically invisible, and if other boats are running dark, there is a chance that you could have a collision. What we've been told is if you are ever approached by pirates, do not reduce speed. Keep your speed full. Try to go as fast as you possibly can using either your sails or engines or both. and just never stop. Because if you stop, you're giving those pirates a chance to board you, and if they board you, you don't know what's going to happen. At least if you can keep the boat moving, there's very little chance they can actually get aboard. Most of the pirate vessels will be running on gasoline engines, and it's very likely that for the long distances they need to cover, they'll be carrying quite a large reserve of gasoline on board, and very flammable. If you were to fire a flare at a pirate vessel with a surplus of gasoline on board, it's very likely that gasoline could ignite. And so flares to pirates would be a very dangerous thing. So for us, having some flares handy while traveling through pirate waters is a good idea. We've also heard that sometimes pirates will ask for things like food or supplies, and that, I'm told, might be a tactic to get you to stop the boat. But you should never stop the boat if there's suspicion of piracy. It might be a good idea to try to maybe bag something up and throw it overboard. They may stop and collect that. If they do stop and collect it, it may buy you just enough time to get away. And maybe that's all they're actually looking for. But you know, you don't want to take any chances. You should never stop moving. You want to go as fast as possible and get away from there. You want to be ready with your EPIRB or any emergency beacons that you can activate on your VHF radio, or even calling in a mayday. If you think that you may be overtaken by pirates, if your EPIRB is activated or you can get a mayday out, there may be a vessel in the vicinity that can reach you and maybe intervene on that pirate attack, or get the Coast Guard involved or something. Anything that can help you, because once you're in the clutches of pirates, who knows what can happen. The subject of weapons tends to come up a lot when talking about piracy and what weapons we do or do not carry on board. Here on Balachandra, we don't carry any weapons on board. We don't even have a machete. I do have an axe, as the Canadian Coast Guard does require you to carry an axe on board. That's just standard ship stores for us, and we have that. Next, I'd like to talk about theft here in the Caribbean and what we've learned from other cruisers. Dinghy theft is most common here in the Caribbean. We hear or read about dinghy theft everywhere we go. When we were anchored in Samana, Dominican Republic, friends of ours lost a dinghy one night. After a fun night of drinking on shore, we had all headed back to our boats for the night. In the morning, we received a call. Their dinghy was gone. I joined a search party, and we looked all through the bay trying to locate their dinghy. I did actually find their dinghy, but we didn't find the motor. The thieves had taken the motor and left the dinghy adrift. We were told later by locals that oftentimes the motor would be used on some sort of vessel to smuggle people from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico. That crime in some areas is created by desperate people simply trying to start a new life in a new place. Dinghy theft happens all through the Caribbean. I think because it's just tied to the side of your boat, it's very easy for someone to come and untie it or take it away. In other cases, the dinghy is just tied poorly and drifts away, and theft might be assumed. It sounds like most of the theft here in the Caribbean is not actually done by the locals. A local person may board your boat with ill intention, and chances are they will just take something that's loose on deck or in the cockpit, or they might grab some cash, and that's about it. If it's beyond that, like unbolting things, removing hardware, or stripping a boat, that's probably not locals. That's probably other cruisers or people who understand the value of the items on their boat and the money they can get for them. There's one instance when we were anchored in St. Lucia. We had a conversation with a gentleman from Europe who had flown home to have surgery and was gone for several months. He actually left his boat at a marina on a marina mooring ball in a safe place and had someone looking after the boat. This person who was looking after the boat was the person who actually removed the boat from the mooring ball, brought it to another bay, completely stripped the boat of all of its hardware, and left it there basically. There's another more extreme example I read about on Active Captain while cruising in St. Lucia, where a solo sailor was anchored and was boarded, tied up, and robbed right there on his vessel. The best advice we could give you against theft while cruising here in the Caribbean would be to suspend your dinghy either with a halyard or on dinghy davits off the stern at night when you're sleeping, or if your boat is unattended. It's generally a good idea to keep your lazarettes locked most of the time, and lock the main hatches on your boat when you're not around. And if you plan to leave the boat for any extended length of time, make sure your boat's stored in a secure location, whether it's a marina or a mooring ball that has someone coming to check on your boat every once in a while. I think it's when boats are neglected and left alone, that's when a lot of problems can occur. But most importantly, read up on your location, do some research, read the comments on Active Captain, and know the history of the anchorage you're in, and if there's been any theft problems in the past, which will let you know whether or not you should take these precautions. So that's the end of this week's video with our take on piracy and theft here in the Caribbean. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found this information helpful. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Just go below the video, look for that big red subscribe button, press that button. You can leave a like or a comment below, and if you haven't checked out our Patreon page, it's always a good time to do so. Patreon's a place where you can give back if you like the videos that we make and you want to support us. Thanks. See you later.